sign it, or we pull the plug on your husband's business license. You think he built that company himself? We have the receipts, sweetheart. Every favor, every connection, every handshake that made him. We own it. And if you don't put your name on that paper tonight, we burn it to the ground. You'll lose the house, the savings, everything. You'll have nothing left to raise that baby with. My mother-in-law did not raise her voice when she said this. She kept it low and smooth, the way you talk to someone you've already defeated. She slid the document across the kitchen table like she was offering me a napkin. She didn't look at my face. She looked at my stomach. I was 32 weeks pregnant. I was also a licensed CPA with 11 years of forensic accounting experience. I had spent my entire career finding the lies people bury in spreadsheets. She had no idea who she was talking to. But before I tell you what happened when I finally stopped being the quiet one in that family, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I want to see how far this goes. My husband's name is Marcus. We met in college, married at 28, and spent 3 years building his small commercial contracting company from a spare bedroom and a lot of prayer. By the time I got pregnant, the business had 8 employees, 2 active contracts, and a solid reputation in our county. We were not rich. We were building something real. His family had never liked me. His mother, I'll call her what she always called herself in front of company, a woman who sacrificed everything for her children, had spent 6 years making it quietly, politely clear that I was not what she had planned for her son. Too independent, she said once to my face with a smile. Too focused on my career, too unwilling to fold myself into the shape she needed me to be. His sister was worse. She was 2 years older than Marcus, unmarried, and had spent the better part of a decade cycling through jobs, relationships, and crises that somehow always landed on Marcus to fix. He paid her rent twice. He co-signed a car loan she defaulted on. He never said no to her because their mother had trained him not to. I watched all of it and said very little. I am not naturally a quiet person, but I am a patient one. I knew what I was watching. I had seen that family dynamic in clients before. The matriarch who hoards control like currency, the golden child who drains the account, the outside partner who gets blamed for every withdrawal. I kept records, not because I was planning anything. I just can't help it. It's how my brain works. The document she slid across my kitchen table that night was a general power of attorney. Broad, sweeping, and drafted by someone who clearly wanted to make it look like a standard family financial planning form. If I signed it, Marcus's mother would have legal authority to make decisions on behalf of our household assets in the event that Marcus was incapacitated or otherwise unavailable. She had also, I noticed immediately, predated it by 3 months. I looked up from the paper. She was watching me with that particular patience of a woman who had never once been told no and enforced. Across the table, Marcus's sister sat with her arms crossed and her chin up, looking like a woman who had already spent the money. "Where is Marcus?" I asked. "He had a work call. He'll be back later." She said it casually. Too casually, like she had timed this. I looked at the clock. 7:42 p.m. Marcus had texted me at 6:30 saying he'd be home by 8. She had engineered exactly this window, just enough time to get my signature before he walked in the door. "What is this actually for?" I asked. She folded her hands, patient, practiced. "It's just a precaution, honey. With the baby coming, if anything were to happen to Marcus during the birth, God forbid you'd be overwhelmed. This just lets me step in and help manage things temporarily." "Things," I repeated. "The business accounts, the property, nothing dramatic." Her daughter leaned forward then. "Mom has a right to protect the family's interests. Marcus built that company with our father's connections. Those relationships belong to all of us. Their father had died 4 years ago. He had left behind a small estate, a web of community relationships, and a will that left the bulk of his assets to Marcus's mother. What she had not told Marcus, what I had figured out 8 months ago when I found a forwarded bank statement in Marcus's email, was that she had spent through almost all of it. The savings, the annuity, the proceeds from selling the family's second property, gone. And not to any obvious extravagance, absorbed over time into her daughter's chaos. She needed access to Marcus's business because Marcus's business was the last solvent thing left in her orbit. I understood all of this in the time it took me to exhale. I need to read it more carefully, I said. I'll have my attorney look at it this week. That was when she stopped being polite. You don't need an attorney. This is family. Her voice dropped the warmth it had been performing. And I think you should consider very carefully what happens if Marcus finds out you've been the reason his business contacts started drying up. I went still. We know people, she continued. People who gave Marcus his first contracts as a favor to our family. People who return phone calls because of our father's name. One conversation, and that goodwill disappears. You'll have a husband with a failing business and a newborn baby, and you'll spend the rest of your life wondering if you could have prevented it. She nodded at the paper. Or you sign this tonight, and we remain a family who takes care of each other. I looked at the document. I looked at her hands, still folded neatly. I looked at her daughter, who was inspecting her phone like this was already decided. I thought about the 4 other times in 6 years that I had swallowed something sharp and smiled and kept the peace. The holidays I had hosted when she criticized my cooking. The baby shower she had taken over until it looked nothing like what I'd wanted. The afternoon she told Marcus in front of me that some women weren't built for motherhood, and he should be realistic about expectations. Every time I had stepped back, I had done it for Marcus because he loved her despite everything, and I loved him enough to carry the weight of her. But she had just threatened my husband's livelihood in my kitchen while he was gone, and she was looking at my pregnant stomach the way people look at something they've already decided belongs to them. I need some water, I said. I got up slowly, went to the kitchen sink, ran the tap, and while the water ran, I thought very clearly about what happened next. I had 2 options. I could ask them to leave, tell Marcus everything, and watch him spend the next 6 months agonizing between his wife and his mother right as our daughter entered the world. Or I could end this cleanly, permanently, and in a way that meant it could never be restarted. I chose the second option. I turned off the tap and came back to the table. You know what? I said, sitting back down. You're right. The baby is almost here and I don't want any more tension. I'll sign it. Her entire body relaxed. A millisecond of it. A small collapse of the performance before she reassembled herself into graciousness. I'm so glad we could come to an understanding. I just want to make sure I'm signing the right version, I said. Can I take a photo of it to reference later? Of course, she said, because saying no would have looked suspicious. I photographed every page. That night, after they left and Marcus came home, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and my notes and my 11 years of training, and I worked until 2 in the morning. The power of attorney had been drafted by a notary named in the footer. Not a licensed attorney. It contained a clause that would have allowed Marcus's mother to refinance the property without Marcus's direct signature under a specific hardship provision. The predating was not accidental. It was designed to make the document appear to predate our daughter's birth, which in our state would have affected how certain marital assets were classified. In other words, she hadn't just been threatening to call in old favors. She had come to my kitchen with a document designed to give her legal access to our home. I called my own attorney the next morning. Then I called an old colleague at the state licensing board. We'd worked together years ago on a fraud case. And I asked her a few careful questions about how licensing influence claims were typically investigated. Then I did something that felt counterintuitive but was, I knew, exactly right. I texted my mother-in-law, "Thank you for last night. I'd like to continue the conversation. Could we meet this week?" There's a notary at the title company on Henderson Ave. I'd feel more comfortable signing somewhere official rather than at home. Would Thursday work? She responded in 4 minutes. Of course, honey. Thursday is perfect. I'll bring my daughter. She thought she had me. Thursday came overcast and cold. I arrived at the title company 40 minutes early. The title officer, a woman named Renee, who I had called Tuesday and spoken to at length, was expecting me. I explained the situation clearly. I showed her the photograph document. I explained the predating, the fraudulent notarization footer, and the hardship clause. She pulled the document up on her system and confirmed within 12 minutes that the notary named in the footer had a suspended license. If someone presents a fraudulently backdated POA at a title company in this state, I asked, what happens? We're mandatory reporters, she said. We flag it, we hold the transaction, and we contact the state attorney's office. And if I bring the people who created the document here today, she looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, I'll have our compliance officer available. I thanked her. I went to the restroom. I looked at myself in the mirror. I was 32 weeks pregnant, wearing a navy blazer over a maternity dress, and my lower back had been aching since 6 that morning. I did not look powerful. I looked tired. Good. I needed them comfortable. They arrived at 10:05. My mother-in-law in a tan trench coat, her daughter in a blazer, both of them carrying that particular posture of people who have never walked into a room they didn't own. They did not ask how I was feeling. They did not ask about the baby. They looked at the table, the document folder I'd placed at the far end, and sat down. I appreciate you both coming, I said. I kept my voice soft, slightly uncertain. I had been careful with my posture, shoulders forward, hands resting on my stomach, the universal body language of a woman who has run out of fight. We're glad you came around, my mother-in-law said. This is the right decision for everyone. I've been thinking about what you said, I said, about the business contacts, Marcus's father's connections. I paused. Let the silence stretch just one beat too long. Can you tell me more specifically which relationships you were referring to? I just want to understand what we're actually talking about. Her daughter leaned in. She had never once in 6 years been able to resist the opportunity to be the one who knew something. The Hendricks Group. The county commissioner's office. The subcontractor network Dad built for 30 years. None of that would exist without our family name attached to it. So Marcus's contracts, the ones he's currently operating under, those came through your father's connections. Most of the early ones, yes, my mother-in-law said, which is why it's only fair that the family retains some oversight over. So if Marcus knew you were threatening to pull those relationships as leverage, I said, still soft, still carefully small-voiced, he'd know that you've been taking credit for something he built himself over 11 years. A small silence. That's not what this is, she started. And if the licensing board knew that someone was claiming influence over county contracting relationships as a personal bargaining chip, that's a pretty specific allegation. I looked at her steadily. Those are the kinds of allegations that get investigated regardless of whether they're true, aren't they? Just the investigation alone. Her face did something complicated. I looked up the notary on this document, I said, and slid the photographed pages across the table. Her license has been suspended since March, which means this document isn't just coercive. It's fraudulent. The door behind them opened. Renee walked in with the compliance officer. They didn't say anything. They didn't need to. My mother-in-law looked at the door, then at the document, then at me. For the first time in 6 years, she had nothing to perform toward. This is ridiculous, her daughter said loudly, pushing back from the table. We came here in good faith. You came here with a fraudulently notarized power of attorney that you backdated to predate my daughter's birth, I said. That's not good faith. That's a felony. Renee set a printed form on the table. We're required to report this to the state attorney's office. You are both free to leave, but this filing will proceed regardless. My mother-in-law stood up. She was not panicked, not yet, but for the first time her composure had a hairline crack running through it. She looked at me and said very quietly, "You have just destroyed this family." "No," I said. You brought a fraudulent document to my kitchen and threatened my husband's livelihood to get me to sign it. I just made sure there were witnesses. They left. No screaming. No dramatics. Just the specific silence of people who suddenly understood the ground had shifted. I sat in that conference room for a few minutes after they were gone. Renee brought me a cup of water without being asked. My back was screaming. The baby had spent the last 40 minutes pressing on my ribs like she knew something was happening and wanted a front row seat. I called Marcus from the parking lot. This was the part I had been dreading more than anything else. Not the meeting, not the document. Telling the man I loved that his mother had come to our home while he was on a work call and tried to defraud us. He didn't say anything for a long time after I finished. The whole time, he said finally, she's known about the business contacts. She's been holding that over you. Over both of us, I said. She was waiting for a moment when I was vulnerable enough. Another silence. I'm coming home, he said. I'm okay. I know you are. I'm coming home anyway. What followed was not a clean ending. Real things rarely are. The state attorney's office opened a review. The suspended notary, when contacted, confirmed that she had been asked to backdate the document and had refused, meaning someone else had forged her name on the final version. That escalated things considerably. Marcus had one conversation with his mother. I was not in the room for it. I don't know everything that was said. What I know is that he came out an hour later looking like a man who had put down something very heavy, and he held me in the kitchen for a long time without speaking. His sister called me 3 days later, crying, wanting to explain. I listened for about 90 seconds. Then I said, I hope things get easier for you, and I ended the call. That was the last time we spoke. The business contacts his mother had threatened to pull. Marcus called every single one of them himself, told them directly what had happened. You know what most of them said? They said they'd been doing business with Marcus because of Marcus, not because of a name, not because of old handshakes, because he showed up, did the work, and didn't cut corners. His mother had been bluffing with borrowed chips. 6 weeks later, our daughter arrived at 6:47 in the morning, screaming and furious, and absolutely perfect. Marcus cried. I didn't, which surprised me. I'd thought I would. Instead, I just felt this enormous, settling quiet, like a door finally closing on a room that had been drafty for years. We named her June. She will grow up knowing exactly who her father is and what her mother is capable of, and that neither of those things were given to us by someone else's table. The legal process took several months. In the end, his mother received a formal reprimand and civil liability for the document fraud. No prison time. She was in her early 60s, first offense. Cooperative with investigators once her daughter stopped coaching her. But the finding is on record. It doesn't disappear. She sent a card when June was born. No return address. Just a store-bought card with a pink elephant on the front and her name signed inside. Nothing else. Marcus put it in the recycling. June never knew it existed. 3 months after June was born, I was sitting in our backyard on a Sunday afternoon. Marcus was inside doing dishes. June was asleep in the carrier on my chest, making those small involuntary sounds that newborns make, like they're narrating dreams they can't quite hold on to. I thought about all the times I had bitten my tongue at that woman's table. All the times I had let something land on me and absorbed it and moved on because the cost of responding felt too high. I used to think that was maturity, restraint. I understand now that it was inventory. Every quiet moment was me taking note of exactly what I was dealing with. Every swallowed objection was me getting clearer on what I would and would not tolerate when the moment actually mattered. The moment mattered. I was ready. If you've ever stayed quiet longer than you should have, because you were building a case instead of running from a fight, type the word ready in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone in that. There's a particular kind of damage that gets done slowly, not all at once, not in one dramatic moment you can point to and say, there, that's when it broke. It happens in accumulation. a comment at a holiday dinner, a decision made about your baby shower that wasn't yours to make, a sentence dropped in front of your husband like a seed, designed to grow into doubt. For 6 years, I absorbed all of it and told myself I was being the bigger person. I was being patient. I was protecting Marcus from having to choose. What I understand now is that patience without a limit isn't a virtue. It's an invitation. She brought a fraudulent document to my kitchen while my husband was on a work call. She timed it. She sat across from me, folded her hands, and told me that if I didn't sign away legal authority over everything Marcus and I had built, she would make phone calls that destroyed it. She looked at my pregnant stomach when she said it. Not at my face. My stomach, like the only thing about me that mattered was what I was carrying. That is the moment I think about when people ask me if I have any regrets about how this ended. I don't. What she didn't account for, what people who use fear as leverage almost never account for, is that the person they're threatening might be someone who has spent their entire career understanding exactly how fraud works. She handed a forensic accountant a fraudulent document and expected a scared daughter-in-law. She got 11 years of training and a very clear understanding of mandatory reporting law. The choices we make have weight, not in some abstract poetic sense, in a very literal consequential one. She chose to backdate that document. She chose to forge a notary's signature. She chose to sit in my kitchen and threaten the livelihood of a man who had spent years quietly bailing out her mistakes. Every one of those choices carried a cost she hadn't calculated because she had spent decades in a family system where the costs always landed on someone else. They landed on her this time. Not because I wanted to punish her. Because I refused to absorb them anymore. Marcus called every business contact she had threatened to pull, every single one. And almost all of them said the same thing, that they worked with him because of him. Not a name, not an old handshake. Because he showed up and did the work right. She had been holding leverage over us that was never real. That's the thing about people who rule through fear, take the fear away, and there's nothing underneath it. June is 3 months old now. She sleeps in a room painted the palest yellow, and she makes sounds in her sleep like she's working something out. I watch her sometimes and think about what I'm actually trying to give her. Not safety in the sense of a world without difficulty. I can't give her that. But a model, a way of moving through hard things that doesn't require her to make herself smaller to survive them. Intelligence without ethics is just a tool that can be pointed anywhere. Resilience without wisdom is just stubbornness wearing a better outfit. What I want June to see, when she's old enough to understand any of this, is that the three things held together, knowing what's right, knowing how to think, and refusing to quit, those aren't separate qualities. They are the same quality, expressed in different moments. I stayed quiet for 6 years because I was watching, because I was learning exactly what I was dealing with. When the moment came that actually mattered, I was ready. I didn't run. I didn't fold. I walked into that title company 40 minutes early and I built a room she couldn't escape from. Not with anger, not with cruelty, but with every careful thing I had paid attention to. That's the only revenge worth having. Not hurting someone back. Becoming someone they genuinely underestimated.